gang? I am Joe Edelman, and welcome to The Last Frame Live. Tonight, we're going to wrap up our discussion about photographing kids' sports. Also, of course, I've got a new DIY hack tonight and the exclusive Last Frame photography Q&A. So start typing. If you're here, I'll do my best to answer all of your questions in the next 60 minutes. And if you're not here live, you can leave the questions in the comments. I'll get them next week, right? So if you are here live, please leave me a note in the chat. Let me know who you are and where you are in the world. And if you're watching the replay, again, no worries. Drop a comment below the video so that I know you were here. Already, gosh, who do we got here? We got Pateo in Switzerland. Joe's here from Vista, California. Lynn in New York. Nick's here in Delaware. All of you, thank you. You're all part of a growing global community of photographers who tune in from over 100 countries every week to watch The Last Frame. And for that, I'm going to work really hard to help you with your photography tonight. And of course, the business stuff, right? It would help a lot more people find out about The Last Frame. Do me a solid, hit that thumbs up. Doesn't cost you any money. It requires very little effort. The more thumbs up, the more YouTube recommends the show to other photographers. And of course, while you're down there, feel free to hit that share button. Let your photography friends know that we're streaming live on YouTube right now. Twitter, Facebook, or excuse me, X and Facebook are the fastest way to get the word out. All right, so we do have just a tiny little bit of photography news this week, and that comes to us from Tamron. This is something that a lot of Nikon users have been waiting for a little while now. They have released the 35 to 150 f2 to 2.8, which is a super popular, super cool lens that Tamron makes. I'm not sponsored by Tamron. Again, let's get it clear. I pay for all my Tamron gear. I love Tamron. I've done some teaching for them. That's it. But this lens people have been waiting for, Nikon users especially have been waiting for a while. If you are going on vacation, if you're going to be shooting and don't want to have carry a ton of gear, absolutely a great lens. Yes, it's a little on the heavy side for a single lens. But the cool part is you're not going to need a camera bag with a bunch of other lenses. Also, it's a little bit on the pricey side for one lens. Comes in at about $1,800. But keep in mind, that's covering focal lengths from 35 millimeter all the way up to 150 millimeter. And it comes with Tamron's 6-year warranty. So you've been told. Also, just to keep you up to date on my presentations that are coming up, we're wrapping up July. Got a bunch of stuff coming up for August. I guess it would help if I refresh that page. There we go. August 8th, I'm going to be doing a camera club presentation for Basecamp Photo Club. You can actually sign up and attend this even if you're not a member of Basecamp Photo Club. I'll be sharing links on my social. It's post-processing. It's the basics. It's all about workflow, okay? So it's really about good habits. A bunch of you made it out to my talk this past Monday for Daisy, all about the power of why. I've got another one coming up on August 14th. This one is all about imposter syndrome. And for those of you that are a little bit older, like me, right? It's really easy for baby boomers, Generation X to kind of say, imposter syndrome, that's, the millennials, and especially those Gen Zers, all those snowflakes. Look, here's the thing. If you take 5 minutes to actually learn about what imposter syndrome is, you're going to realize that you've dealt with it. Honestly, pretty much anything that you do that you're passionate about and that you care about, you're going to deal with imposter syndrome. It's part of the process, right? So anyway, we're going to talk about that, talk about some ways to cope with it and to manage it. August 18th, I'm going to be in person for a full day event. This is from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Portrait photography. Create the difference, make it fun, market it, and sell it. This is for VPPA, which is the Virginia Professional Photographers Association of Fredericksburg, Virginia is where we're going to be at. And then also August 29th, the last of 3 presentations that I'm doing for Daisy. Competition is a choice. If you think you're competing against other photographers, you're doing photography wrong. There is no competition. I have no competition. I never have, except when I have chosen competition. So we're going to talk about that, talk about how to deal with all that kind of stuff, and hopefully solve some problems for you, right? Okay, so moving right along. DIY. First of all, let me just say that I am glad that a lot of you are finding value in these DIY tips and hacks. As I explained from the beginning, some weeks they'll be a little bit bigger, more earth-shattering than others. Some weeks they're just going to be real simple things that I know that I do that make a difference for me. And that's kind of what this week is. My DIY hack this week, red tape. I know we all hate red tape. So if you really hate red tape, you can go ahead and you can use blue tape, or you could use yellow tape or green tape or whatever color you like. What's the tape all about? So the tape is actually just part of the hack for this week, right? If you look at the lens behind me right there, you'll notice the red tape. If you look at this 70 to 180, you'll notice the red tape on the hood. You'll also notice the red tape on the lens cap, right? I have red tape on everything that's mine. My monopod, red tape. So this is something that I started doing way back in my newspaper days, and especially back in the 70s and 80s, since we didn't have all the kind of cool stuff available that we do today. Electrical tape was easy to find, and if you looked hard, you could find a couple of colors other than black. Now, you can find any color you want, right? Just go to Amazon.com and you'll find loads of colors. It's simply a way of identifying your gear. In today's world, we all know there are tons of photographers, tons of people with cameras. And when I say photographers, look, I'm talking straight up just people with cameras, right? Cameras are actually very affordable today. I mean, I get it. We can spend lots of money and we wish we had more money to get more gear. But the fact is, cameras are very affordable. So you could go to an event just for fun, and there's a good likelihood there's going to be other people with similar gear. So it's simply a way of making a quick identification of your camera. For what it's worth, if you haven't done this already, if you've got a camera, a couple lenses, maybe a flash, if you don't have like a little spreadsheet set up where you're actually tracking your serial numbers and all that kind of stuff, and you have it set aside, ooh, that's going to be a problem if your stuff ever gets stolen and you want to be able to make an insurance claim, right? So take a few minutes to do that. There are some apps for that. Actually, Jared Poland, Photos Photo, he is affiliated with a guy that built an app for that. Doesn't matter how you do it, just do it. For me, I'm a big fan of Notion, which is an online notebook platform. Not saying that you need to go out and use Notion, but I run much of my business out of Notion. It's like a second brain, and that's actually a phrase that gets used with Notion a lot. So for me, I have a database set up in Notion where I track all of my serial numbers, all of that kind of stuff. But I try to identify every piece of gear that I have with either the red tape or a Dymo label. So if you're old enough, you know that Dymo labels are like when you put like these little, let's see if that'll focus for me. There we go. There's little sticky labels, you know, on them. Okay. Is that going to grab? There it grabbed. No, it's not going to grab. There you go. Okay. So, you use a gadget like this. It's a Dymo labeler. You can put whatever information you want on them. So for me, I use those labels on my battery set. So as you saw, one was my identifier, have my website address. The other one was letting me know which number Sony battery that is. That is very helpful, by the way. So if you have multiple batteries, make sure you have a way to identify the different batteries. Otherwise, what will inevitably happen to you is you'll reach a point where one of the batteries is not going to be holding charges properly. And basically, it's going to begin the process of failing. But if you're not tracking which batteries are which, you're not going to have any idea, and that battery is going to keep biting you in the butt because you're going to swap out batteries, you're going to put it in the camera, and 5 minutes later, your battery's going down, right? Always track the numbers. That way, if you have a battery that you think, you know, depleted itself super, super quick, when you pull it out of the camera switch, look at the number, remember that, and then when you're back home and you can breathe, charge that battery, put it in the camera, and just go out for an hour or two and shoot, okay? And see if that battery's going to hold up. Maybe it was just your imagination. Maybe it really is beginning to fade. In which case, doesn't mean you can't use it. It just means you want to make sure you're only using it when you know it's not going to be a problem for you to have to change batteries, right? Spur of the moment. I also use the dymo labelers even on my camera. So like on the camera that you see behind me, if we pull out the flip screen, on the inset behind the flip screen has my name, right? And my website address. And it's also noted as camera body number 1 because I have 2 of the Sony a7 IVs. So same deal, right? That way, if I have a situation where I seem to be having an issue and I'm shooting with 2 cameras, I'm going to know which body it is. Also, while we're talking about camera body 1, camera body 2, if you're a 2-body shooter, I change the prefix on my file names in the camera. So this camera is JPE, my initials, 1 for camera 1. The other camera is JPE2, right? So little things that will help you out. But the tape, the way to identify your stuff, super, super helpful. It's kind of one of those things. It's not a problem until it's a problem, so it's always a good idea to have it. I've had people ask me when I talk about that, well, like, what about these like camera skins that, you know, they sell now where you can get them with colors or patterns, even though they have the ones that are like the digital camouflage, it's all the grays, or you can get them with regular camouflage for you wildlife shooters and that kind of stuff. I think that skins are great for everything except identifying your camera. The reason being, they're selling that skin. There could be, 50, 100 other people that show up at some event that you're at that have that same skin. So that's not necessarily going to work for you. I see the skins as serving more of a purpose. If you tend to be tough on your bodies, you want a little extra padding, skins can be great. Same with your lenses. If you are a wildlife shooter and there's benefit to you having the actual camouflage, then skins can be great. But for me, the skin is not what I'm going to use to visually identify my camera if it's in a group of cameras. I want something that's going to stand out a little bit more and be a little bit easier to find. Okay? All right, so that's your tip for this week. Moving right along, let's get back to our sports conversation, right? So last week, we talked about photographing kids' sports. And actually, I had a couple really, really good questions that were submitted to me. So we'll deal with those in the Q&A because I'm also probably going to mention bits of it, but I want to go back and address them directly. So just to review a couple of things, right? For last week, when I'm getting to a baseball game, and this would be for any sporting event where I am shooting natural light, okay? I am selecting my shutter speed based on the action that I am going to photograph. So shutter speed with purpose, right? I explained to you last week that with baseball, I'm usually shooting at a shutter speed of 1/2500th or 1/3200th of a second, somewhere in that range. If I was shooting pro sports like Major League Baseball and I was shooting it for a newspaper or a magazine, I would probably want to be at a shutter speed up around 1/8000th of a second. So why do I use the slower shutter speeds? Well, 1, it's kids, so I don't need it quite as fast. But 2, I actually want just a hint of motion in the bat and the ball, right? I want that image to have that impression that these kids are using lots of power and the ball's traveling really fast. So a little bit of motion actually helps communicate that story. So I'm a firm believer that when you're shooting action and sports, don't get so caught up automatically in the idea that you have to freeze every element of the action or the motion that's happening. Sometimes using that, taking advantage of it, actually helps you to tell the story. Last week, I mentioned the story that earlier in this baseball season, the very first game of the year, I did some shots of my grandson. And when he saw the photos, the first thing he asked me is like, did you Photoshop the ball into the picture? Because he wanted to make sure that it was really a picture of him hitting the ball. And I was offended when he first said it. I'm like, well, no, it's like, that's you. And then I realized when everything was tack sharp, it actually just looked kind of fake. So a little bit of motion gives that image a little bit more, a little bit more emotion and a little bit more feeling, and it kind of helps tell the story, right? So I promised you all that this week I would get into the post-processing of the files, just to show you kind of some of the tricks, some of the things that I do. So I just grabbed a couple pictures literally right before we came online because I want you to see that these are also, this is right out of the camera. This is the way these images are being shot. So there's no cropping applied yet. There's no processing applied yet. And these images actually give me a kind of a good representation of things to point out to you. Things that people sometimes get a little too hung up on, especially on the internet, right? So these two shots here working in sunlight, but with a dark background. So now remember, I'm shooting auto ISO. I select my shutter speed. I got off track, didn't I? I select my shutter speed and my aperture. My aperture is almost always wide open. The lens that I'm using is a 5.6 to 6.3. And so I'm working wide open all the time, right? So in a case like you're seeing on the screen now, for these two pictures where I've got that dark background, with auto ISO, the camera is going to want to overexpose that image. I know that from experience as soon as I aim the camera in that direction. So I don't have to wait to see it's going to do it. I know it's going to happen. So as I'm setting up to take that shot, I've also got my thumb on the exposure compensation dial, and I'm going to wind up dropping it down to probably -0.5, maybe -1 in some situations, not in these particular ones, but that's going to be a given, right? Because what I don't want to do is I don't want to have my whites completely blown out. Now, notice what I said there, completely blown out, right? Look at this image on the screen. This is an extreme lighting scenario, right? You've got white that is in bright sunlight. You have got dark shadow areas, okay? You've got faces that are in shade and in shadow, faces that are getting a lot of reflected light off of the light colored dirt. So there's an incredible amount of range in this image, right? Now, what does our eye expect to see in an image like this? If you look along where I've got my mouse here, along the front edge of this hitter's leg and on his arm, where indeed that white right there on his arm, that's blown out. It's gone. That does not bother me at all because it's minimal and it's what we would expect to see. If you're in a situation like that with your own eyes, with this much shadow area in front of you, your eyes will actually lose the detail in that white and find it very hard to look at that little bit of white. So I'm okay with that. Now, if I lose the detail in all of his pants, that's a big problem. If I lose detail on the ball, that's a big problem. Even in the dirt, while it's very light, there's detail all the way through there. So we're going to bring that back in, okay? These two images that you're looking at right here, this one's at ISO 1600, and I'll show you these at 100% when we get them into camera raw. This one's at ISO 1000. These are both at 2,500 to the second. You can see in this one, I actually only had to do the exposure compensation about minus a third of a stop, minus a third of a stop on this one. So different time of the day, very different lighting situation. Okay, a lot of backlit sunlight hitting the picture on the side, and then the majority of him in shade. So as I'm shooting a picture like this, I want to protect all this grass and dirt. I don't want to lose the detail. I also need to protect the shadow area. And if I lose tiny bits of the highlights, it's not going to be that bad because again, that's how the light's hitting. That's what our eyes expect to see, right? If you protect the detail in an extreme lighting situation like this, if you protect every bit of detail, highlight and shadow area, you're going to wind up with images that kind of look like you're heading towards HDR, right? There's got to be those extremes but you don't want them to eliminate important parts of the shot. Okay. Different game again. You can tell right out of the box it's overcast. This game was very late in the day. This was probably like 7:30, 7:45 at night on a field with no lights. So it's starting to get dark. That's why the images are a little bit blue. By the way, auto white bounce on this stuff. But this is why the images are going a little bit blue. You'll also notice on this one, I didn't need to do any exposure compensation. So I was at 1/2500th of a second, but up to ISO 4000. And then on this one here, okay, even though the image looks a little bit brighter from my initial exposure, this was even later in the game. This is an ISO 12,800 image, okay? So, in fact, here, we'll start with these last two at the end. I'm going to bring up the two cloudy image ones, and I'll open up Camera Raw, and let me just see if I can adjust that. No, it's not going to let me adjust it. All right, so I want to make sure that you guys can see everything that's going to happen here. All right, so I talk about workflow for processing. And by the way, I've got that presentation I'm doing for Basecamp Photo, which you can all attend if you want. It's all about processing, where I do my whole workflow. But let me show you very, very quickly. These are the steps that I would take to process this photo. By the way, I promised you guys that I would show it to you at 100%. So at 100%, and obviously you lose a little bit going through the YouTube, right? As I sit here and look at the screen, I'm on a 31-inch screen. With the file at 100%, I can start to see noise. Remember, this is the image, excuse me, we'll do this one. This is the image that's 12,800 ISO. I can start to see noise that is beyond my tolerance for noise, right? Certainly if we go larger, you'll see it's golf ball size noise, right? So actually, before I go on, let me address this. This is one of those situations where you're shooting games, and obviously I shoot these because I want the pictures of my grandson. So I'm shooting these for myself, I'm shooting these for my son and daughter-in-law, and I photograph all the kids on the team for the kids' parents. That's a freebie, right? I talked about that business piece, and I'll talk a little bit more about that tonight. But so I'm most concerned, number one priority, with creating great moments and recording them, etc. I'm least concerned about having pictures that other photographers, especially on the internet, are going to say, oh my God. Just saying, right? But 12,800, that's kind of beyond my noise tolerance without additional processing. I'm not afraid to shoot at it because especially now with the denoise features of Adobe Camera Raw, which is what you're seeing on the screen, or for that matter, if you're using like Topaz AI or Topaz Denoise, the denoise features that are out there are incredible. Even the denoise features in Luminar are amazing, right? So that's why I go ahead and shoot, and I'm not concerned with it. There have been a couple games this year where if it's a 6 o'clock game, usually finishes around 8 o'clock or a few minutes after 8 o'clock. If it's an overcast night, by the time we get to like 7:50 p.m., I don't shoot with the long lens because I'm pushing ISOs that are in the 20,000s. And while the denoise feature will actually do an amazing job of it, that's the point where it's relying so much on the AI that the image starts to look a little artificial to me. And so I don't like pushing it that far. I keep shooting. I just switch over to the 70 to 180 and I work with a shorter lens, right? And I take a different approach to the shots that I'm doing, okay? So for these images, let's go back to the first one here. So my steps for processing, believe it or not, start down here because I apply these to every image. And you can create presets, by the way, that you would repeat this with. But I always set my vibrance to 30. I set my saturation to 2. I always select use profile selection so that it is going to add in the profile for that image. And I always select remove chromatic aberration, even though these images really don't have a whole lot of chromatic aberration anywhere. So why click it? It's simple. It doesn't hurt if you click it. In other words, if there's no chromatic aberration in your image, it's not going to have any negative impact on your image. But if there is chromatic aberration, it will resolve some of it. It's not a perfect solution, but it resolves some of it, right? So I just automatically check that across the board. Let's go back up to detail. I always adjust my sharpening. This confuses a lot of people because you hear all over the internet, don't sharpen until you output. No, that's wrong. It's simply wrong. Every image that you see of mine, every image, all my studio work, baseball work, everything is sharpened this way. I do plus 20 on whatever the camera default is. So the camera default for my Sonys is 40. Most cameras will start at 40. Some cameras start at 25. So you got to pay attention. Basically, I'm adding 20. So I go to 60, right? And now my processing is going to happen in here. What I'm not going to do, the first thing I'm not going to do is I'm not going to go ahead and grab the exposure slider and lighten it. That's usually going to be the least thing I'm going to do. I'm going to work with highlights first. And you notice as I pull the highlights down, all that really changes is the dirt, but I get the detail back in the dirt and the dirt evens out. That's what I want. So I'm going to pull the highlights way down. Now, at this point, the shadows are blocking up on this kid. The shadows are blocking up inside the helmet. So I'm going to grab the shadow slider and I'm going to bring that up a little bit and solves everything with the kid. Doesn't do much inside the helmet. There's a little more detail there, but it's not great. But that's all we need, right? This particular image, because it's so much in shade, hasn't really flattened out, but I'm still going to boost the blacks a little bit more. Now notice, even when I boost the blacks, I'm all the way down to minus 18, I still have detail on the back of this kid and in his hair, right? That's the beauty of this, okay? Now, obviously the image is kind of blue, so I'm going to put a little yellow into it by bringing that slider back over to the yellow. So now I've got a nicer color range. And yeah, overall, it could afford to be brightened just a tad. So now I will go to exposure and brighten it ever so slight. Okay, cool. Now, that's all the work I'm going to do for the moment because I know that the noise is really heavy in this and I want to fix the noise because there's one other big set of adjustments I'm going to do, but I can't do them, or at least I shouldn't do them until after I do the noise. So I'm going to go back to detail. I'm going to click denoise and noise reduction. And this is the AI noise reduction tool that Adobe has released, which is amazing. It's usually defaults right around like the midpoint 45 or so, but I want to bring it up to my grandson's face here. There we go. So that I can see what I'm looking at here. So there's the enhanced version. There's without enhanced. If you go too heavy on these, they start to look like Norman Rockwell paintings. You don't want that, right? So I'm going to bring this up probably like around 55, 56, somewhere in there, 54. That's looking good. This way, there's still ever so slight a hint of texture in that file. Some will call it grain, some will call it noise. I call it texture because it's not noise like it's already in the photo. It honestly looks a little bit more like film grain, and we're only seeing it at 100%, actually bigger than 100% right here, right? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click Enhance. It'll take a few seconds, but what it's going to do, it's going to create a DNG file, a digital negative file, right? And that's the file that I will continue to do my work on, okay? So now you'll notice over here, there's my original Sony RAW file. It's up on the top, and it's created the DNG file, and it's the DNG file that is in the window here now. So all my adjustments, as long as I have that active, are going to be on the DNG file, not the RAW, right? So now the next big piece that I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the masking tool. And by the way, everything I'm doing here is available in Lightroom. It's the same piece of software. It just looks a little bit different the way it's laid out. So I'm going to first create a background mask. And you'll notice it has selected all three of the kids. That's fine. I'm going to leave it at that. And most of the images that I do, I bring it down to a minus 35, right? And that's kind of my default number. I will adjust that accordingly sometimes, but so let me go back to 0 so you can watch it, right? There's the unedited, there's the minus 35. So now when you watch the difference occur, it's a pretty substantial difference, but what has it done? It's really made the kids pop out of the frame, right? And that's exactly what I want. If you prefer a little bit more subtle, nothing wrong with that at all. You get down maybe 20. That's nice too. Cool. So we'll leave that there. Other things that you can do, I do it some of the times, not all the time, right? I will sometimes drop the saturation of that background down, and I apologize. Wait, let me move this over because you're not able to see that. My bad. There we go. I'll drop the saturation of the background down by 2 or 3, and I'll even go and drop the texture of the background down by around, I don't know, 5 to 7, and the sharpness down around 5 to 7. Don't go too crazy with those 2 settings, but a little bit, not bad. The reason why you don't go too crazy is understand that when we're talking about background, we're talking about anything in the picture that is not your subjects, which means it's also going to do it to the foreground. So you don't want to get it to where it's looking like one of those tilt shift camera images. That's going to be a little weird, okay? But now that I have that done, in this case, his face is really well lit. So I'm kind of finished with the masking. Well, actually, you know what? No, I'm not. Because this is the beauty of digital photography, folks. You don't have to do what I'm about to do, but if you ask me, it makes a big difference. So our subject really is this kid. It's my grandson. These other kids help tell the story. This kid's face isn't even in the picture, right? The other 2 kids help tell the story. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back to the masking tools. I'm going to click on that mask. I'm going to add and just add a brush. And I want to make this a little bit bigger here, right? And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to brush over the catcher in the background. And I'm going to brush over the kid in the foreground. And now I've got that action happening, right? But my grandson pops out even more. So now I'm going to go back, and as I look at that image, I ultimately want to have it just a tad brighter and with just a tad more yellow in the frame. Done, right? Oh, and of course, cropping. Cropping is almost always going to be my last. I believe in getting your cropping as close as possible in the camera. So there's nothing about this shot that makes it a horizontal shot, even though that's how I shot it. If I go 1:1 for square, there's my composition. Done. Right? That's it. Okay? So the other one that I showed you, kind of the same thing here. Let's get the whole thing in the frame. So I will do my initial settings, vibrance 30, saturation 2, detail is going to go to 60, optics, profile, chromatic aberration, that's cool. Whoops, sorry, let's go up to the basic processor here. We're going to add a little bit more yellow in, which helps not only his skin tones in the overall image, but also makes the dirt look more like dirt instead of it looking like blue dirt, right? Those whites aren't blown out, but I want them to have some details. So I'm going to pull that down, bring the shadows up a little bit, and also the blacks down a little bit just to make sure the contrast has some pop, right? Now, even as I'm looking at this image now, I can see the noise on his face. It's extreme, right? So my next step is to go into detail, click on that denoise, and I want to bring it up to his face. And see, even at 54, that's pretty good. I'll probably take this one up to like 60 because it is a much higher ISO. That's good. Now I've got, again, just a hint of texture in that image. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to process that. When it comes back done, it'll switch over. It'll add it down here at the bottom and it'll switch over. This one's going to take a little bit longer because there's a lot more noise and I'm doing a little bit heavier. So there you go. Now that I've got that, I can go to my masking tool, select the background. Notice it's keeping 3 people in it. Also, I want to point out to you, that tool is not always perfect. Notice it lost this kid's head. Ultimately, I don't care because I'm going to probably take that kid out of the picture. But if I was leaving the kid in, I would want to make him a little bit darker. So you might ask, why would I take him out? Well, because he's not doing anything, right? This is a steal. So my grandson's on first base. He's stealing second base. So this kid's really not at play, right? So What I will do, like I did before, is I'm going to bring the background down to about -35. See, then he gets just that little bit of extra pop. I will go ahead, select the mask, and I'm going to add to the mask with a brush. I want to draw this kid into the mask because I don't need him. And I also don't really need the coach because the coach, it almost looks like the coach is staring right at me. He's not. He's looking at second base. Like I'm lined up right over top of second base. And by the way, I'm all the way out in right field. That's kind of the nice thing about, that lens. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the coach down just a little bit. Boom. And I should have pointed it out before. If you notice, my grandson's toe did not make the mask. So I'm going to do a little subtract, really make this a lot smaller just to get a little bit more pop on, yeah, I did add to it. Okay. All right. So that's basically going to be my process. I'm going to go back to the image here. I'm going to go ahead and do a little more brightening, pull down those highlights just a tad more. And then we're going to also go to a square crop, but this time you'll notice I've got the camera a little crooked. It happens with these long lenses. So I'm going to level it out a little bit, bring it over, and I'm going to go ahead and center my grandson. Again, the coach is secondary to the shot. And now one of the things that I also like to do a lot, and this shot's a perfect example, so here's my last piece of processing for this. I will come back to the main panel, scroll all the way down to effects. Yeah, you can see that. Grab the vignette tool and go to about a -6, right? Very subtle. So let me go back to 0 so you can see what I did there, right? Super subtle. But that -6 does a great job of just darkening the edges and pushing the attention into the center. Super simple. Okay, so that's my process. That's how I do it. The moral to the story is, gang, process your images. We talked about that a couple weeks ago, right? I'm sure I will wind up talking about it again, but that's how you get the most out of your camera and out of the images that you're shooting, right? I find, and I completely understand, that a lot of photographers don't really like having to sit at a computer and do the computer stuff. I get it. The kind of advice my mentors would have given me back in the day would have been like, suck it up and deal with it. That's part of the process. I don't want to give you that advice because, look, I get it. But here's the thing. Maybe if you change your thought process a little bit, and maybe if you notice that when an image is well processed, it makes all the difference in the world, right? Even looking at those images that I just did, looking at the straight out of the camera version compared to the finished version, they're a world apart. And by the way, I'm talking through all of it. It normally takes me about 3 minutes an image. Why so fast? Because I have a workflow. And in the case of the baseball stuff, it's the same kind of adjustments that I'm making every time. I'm going to shoot a tournament this weekend. He's playing in a tournament this weekend. So I'll probably wind up having to process several hundred images before the weekend's over. And in the course of doing it, it's the same basic process for all of them, the ones that I've been, doing, right? So it doesn't actually take that long, but that's because I've built habits and I built a workflow. That's the practice piece, right? But you might be able to help yourself tolerate the digital darkroom if you remind yourself and create an awareness that by doing this work, you're making your images look that much better. And by doing this work, you're getting the best out of your images that you possibly can. So all that money that you spent for that gear, you're really getting the maximum from it. Because like it or not, the cameras are designed for the images to be processed, right? So anyway, that's my thoughts there. I hope that you found that helpful. I mentioned there were a couple questions that came in. I see some of you typing questions, which is great. Don't stop. Keep going. We've got plenty of time here to get to these. The questions that I got several times over this past week, so I want to address those really quick. The This one came up a lot. Auto. I thought auto was bad. Auto is bad. Even auto ISO can be bad. But let me explain. And now some people are going to say, oh, now he's changed the tune because it suits him. No. I've changed my tune because of mirrorless cameras. That's why I've changed my tune. Okay. You'll see me talking a lot more about this year. In fact, I've even got a program that I do called proper exposure, or correct exposure, excuse me. And I talk about this in great detail. Any auto is bad if you set it and forget about it, right? It will eventually bite you in the butt. The cameras that we have today are incredible. They do amazing work, but they're not perfect. Look at the examples that I had with the kids who are sunlit with a dark green tarp behind them. No camera is going to get that perfect. You saw I had to make exposure compensation adjustments to get those exposures correct, right? No camera is going to nail that. It's just not. So I am using the auto ISO, as a tool to get me in the ballpark, and then I'm adjusting the exposure compensation on the fly. At the end of the day, that is faster, quicker, more efficient than if I was shooting completely manual, right? That's why I'm doing it that way. Because think of, how you adjust your ISO and your camera and that. It's so much faster just to click that dial. Done, right? So auto ISO, I don't believe, and I know there are wildlife photographers that will have a fit when I say this, but I'll gladly, not tonight, we won't have time, but I'll gladly take this on if you want. Wildlife photographers, birding people, all that kind of stuff. If you're shooting auto aperture or auto shutter speed, shutter priority, aperture priority, no. You're doing it wrong. You're doing it totally wrong. And I know that there are some very accomplished photographers in those genres that would argue with me. I will take on that argument. The world evolves. Technology evolves. If you're shooting with a DSLR, aperture priority, shutter priority, keep doing what you're doing. That's fine. But you're also using outdated equipment, meaning DSLRs are not going to be around forever. If you're shooting mirrorless, auto ISO is the only auto to use, period. It makes so much more sense. So we can take that up as a separate conversation, okay? Another question that I had from last week came up a few times. What if I can't afford a $2,000 lens, right? You don't have to have a $2,000 lens. A lens like this, 70 to 180. So this doesn't even go up to 200, 70 to 180. Most mirrorless cameras today will allow you to shoot in APS-C mode. Most of the better mirrorless cameras will allow you to shoot in APS-C mode. That makes this, adds another 90 millimeter to this, so it makes it a 270 millimeter lens. That's just shy of a 300 millimeter lens. For like kids sports and stuff like that, this would be great. And it's a 2.8. So even with that lens, I occasionally put the camera into APS-C mode, and then I've got a 900 millimeter lens, right? But you don't have to have super long lenses, right? When if you're going to specialize in something and shoot tons of it, then yeah, you want to save your pennies and you want to go ahead and get the best gear to make the job easier. But most photographers, if they wind up getting like a 24 to 70, something in that range, and then they wind up getting like a 70 to 200, 70 to 180, these lenses are great. Plus with kids sports, it's easier to get closer access to the action than it is if you were like going to shoot a Major League Baseball game, right? So yeah, it's my work is not great because of that lens. That lens is indeed helping me kind of take my work to the next level and give it a little bit like of a Major League Baseball kind of image type feel. But you do not need, to do that. The other question I had, and I see that there's a couple questions kind of bordering around that from Sean and Cooley, and I'll take your questions directly. But the question came up several times about business model because a few people were rather surprised to hear that I was giving these images away for free. But I do actually have some interesting thoughts for those of you that may be considering doing this stuff. So I give away the images for free to the parents. So when I go and shoot a game, so my grandson will play in a minimum of 3 games this weekend. Fingers crossed they'll play in 5, right? If they make it to the championship game, they'll play in 5 games. I will shoot all 5 games, and I don't just shoot my grandson. I shoot every kid on the team. So I shoot the full, um, you know, gear action or game action, right? So, and then I upload the images, which Sean's asking about, Cooley's asking about. So I'll show you guys that stuff in a second. And I let the parents download the full res files. I even give them a printing release so that they can go ahead and get the stuff printed if they want. They can do whatever they want with the pictures. I do that part for Goodwill. Goodwill at several levels. Goodwill for me, everybody's thrilled to see me show up. Oh, I also give the league that they play for access to the images so they can use them on social media for marketing. So they're getting high-end professional photography for free. They're thrilled. The parents are thrilled because they would be out there with their iPhones and that trying to take pictures, or even the moms that have some, low-end DSLR mirrorless cameras. They try to take pictures, but they haven't practiced enough to get a skill set, and they don't have longer lenses. So they're ecstatic that I do it. Most importantly for me, it gets me access. It's also goodwill for my son and for my grandson in the sense that these travel teams, especially the ones he's on now, it's a very competitive process, right? So he, even though he's played on the team all year this year, and statistically he's kind of in the middle of the team in terms of, batting averages and on-base percentage and all of that kind of stuff, he doesn't get an automatic ride to the team next year. In September, they have to go try out again, right? I've always been of the mentality, like, you do everything you can. So if that little bit of, goodwill ever helps him in the sense that, they don't want to get rid of him because they know they're going to get great pictures of their kids, I'm fine with that. That's great because he loves it and he wants to do it. So that's why I do it. But let's talk about the business model thing. In fact, I'm going to do it in 2 pieces here because Sean's got a question and Corey's got a question. So Sean's question, whoops, let me get it back on the screen there. Before the end of the day, could you touch on how you share the photos with the parents? Where do you upload and how you discern what pictures go up? Sure, Sean, I can do that. So, and I have actually, I've shown this before, but that's okay. And I just realized now, son of a gun. Hang on one second. I've got the wrong page up in the browser. So if you'll bear with me for a minute here, I will get the appropriate page so that I can show you guys. While I'm pulling this up, I'll tell you, I use SlickPick. The reason I use SlickPick is that, again, I'm not charging for these. So SlickPick makes it super simple and very, very efficient, etc. If I was going to be charging, I would encourage you to look at something like SmugMug or Pixieset or Zenfolio. SlickPick doesn't have any e-commerce built into it. I don't make money, so that's fine. So basically, for starters here, so the way that, where am I here? Browser. The way that I have this set up, so these are the pictures that are not my grandson. These are the pictures of the other kids on the team. It allows you to customize the page with a header. And then I have a message, which I know it's hard for you guys to see if it's small. I'll read it to you, right? But this is what I type in here. Hi, parents of the Deep Run 8U baseball team. You may have seen me at your son's games with the cameras and big lenses walking around the field. I am Joey's Joe Pup, and I'm a professional photographer. So they obviously got this link in the beginning of the season. Now they all know me, right? I'll be at most of, not all of the games this season, and usually the evening of the game or the next morning, I'll upload photos from the games. If you click on the photos, you'll see them full screen. And if you look in the lower right-hand corner of each photo, while it's large, you'll see an icon to download the photos. So that looks like, if we click on that, it's down here all the way down the bottom. They can download it, right? The message goes on to say the photos are full resolution photos that can be posted on social media, and they're large enough to make fairly large prints. You're welcome to download them and do with them as you wish, no strings attached. If you do post them on social media, feel free to tag me. It has my Instagram, my Facebook, but that's not required. And if you have any questions, they can email me or call me. And then I also have a little note at the bottom. Some printers will require a printing release as there is a copyright embedded in the photos. If so, you can download the release here and provide it to the printer. The printer will know what to do with it, and then they will print your order. The printing release is basically just saying the person who has this file is permitted to print it. In fact, here, let me see if I can actually read the whole thing for you here. With this document, I'm granting permission, non-exclusive license, personal reproduction. I retain the copyright. This is the subject. What's allowed? Basically, they can print them, not allowed. And it goes on to say, if you have any questions, and this is for the printers, email me or call me. In all the years I've been doing this, I've gotten one phone call from a printer, and I actually thanked them. I was like, because I know other people have gotten stuff printed. And they've told me it's like the printer didn't ask for a printing release, and so be it. But yeah, I had one printer that had asked for the release, got it, called me, and said, just wanted to be sure. I was like, thank you for doing that, right? So basically, you want to, and this is cumulative, like through the whole season. So this team is about 15 games in, and so there's like 800 photos in this gallery, right? So each week I just add new ones on top. And then, they want to look at a picture, they click on it and they see it big, and then they can scroll through this way, or, they can scroll through this way. I believe Sean asked, Sean asked, where do you upload and how you discern what pictures go up? What pictures go up, I know I've got Cooley's message up there. What pictures go up, Sean, are just ones that I think are interesting. You notice whenever possible, I want the kids' faces, right? Depending on what position and what's happening, in the picture, there's peak moments. So like, for pitchers, you see a lot of pictures where, the pitcher's hand is like back here and the ball's in the hand, and that's okay. But ultimately, to me, that's kind of boring. Even like this picture here, right? Yeah, that's okay. He's obviously about to throw it, but it's cooler when, they've just released it, or better yet, what I'm always trying to do, these are the pictures that I want of pitchers. I want the ball just coming off of their hand, right? And again, you'll notice, little hint of motion. I could have stopped everything, but I'm leaving in just a hint of motion. So let me go find some other pictures here. See, like, this, all right, parents will love that picture, but for me, that picture is ultimately boring, right? I want that ball when it's releasing. That's really like, even like that, okay? That to me, that's like peak action. When I'm shooting, the kids hitting, I want the ball in a shot, right? Ideally, as they're hitting it or just after they've hit it, but at a minimum, I want the ball in the shot. When it's a play to base, I really want to have the ball in the shot. Sometimes, you can, especially since like this is the kid from the team I'm photographing. From where I was, I couldn't get his face in this shot. So it's super important to me that I get the ball. Even like this, I put that in because it's kind of got a nice action moment, but this is the kid that I'm photographing, and I did not get the ball in the shot. So I know the parents would like those pictures, and that's kind of how I look at it when I'm going through them. I kind of look at it from the standpoint of a parent and like, what I think that's a cool picture of my kid. And along the way, there are, shots with some kind of funny expressions and goofy stuff, because at the same time, you got to be able to laugh at the kids a little bit along the way. So, Cooley, what size are you making them for if you print them? I'm uploading full res files. That's what I'm sending up. I'm giving them the full res files after I crop them, and they can do whatever they want. The reality of it is the overwhelming majority of them don't get printed because people just don't print today, which is kind of unfortunate. But as I mentioned, I have had some, parents tell me, yes, they printed. One of the kids from the very beginning of the season, after the very first time that they saw one of the galleries when I started it, the father told me the very next game, he's like, man, you're costing me money. I'm like, why? He's like, those pictures. I'm like, they're free. He's like, you don't understand. It's like, he wants to get 6 of them printed like posters and hang them on his bedroom wall. And so it's like, to me, that's perfect. That was like the greatest thing that I could possibly hear about the pictures, because the kid loved them. He thought that he looked like a Major League Baseball player. And when I hear that come back to me, that's exactly what I'm trying to accomplish, right? More importantly, not even today, but 4 years from now, 8 years from now, 12 years from now, I want these kids to look back at the pictures and think, my God, I played like a Major League Baseball player, right? And that's the idea. So that's really kind of the thought process behind what's driving my selections and all that kind of stuff. Nick's saying here, Joe, now that you have that big white, I expect to hear about you out in the wetlands in December and January at 4:30 a.m. shooting snow geese at sunrise. Nick, you give me the time and the place, and we'll try and make it happen. I will tell you this much for sure. Conowingo will happen this year. Yeah, I have to do it just because now I don't have an excuse. I was planning on doing it this year with the Tamron lens. I don't know if you were here, Nick, when I explained why I got the big white. The Tamron lens is awesome. I'm not kidding. I highly recommend that lens to anyone. But I've shot, gosh, since like March, I think I'm up to 63 or 64 baseball games since March. That's a lot of dust. That Tamron is an extending zoom. And while it does have some weather sealing, I'm realizing, my grandson's got probably at least another 7 years of baseball. And that's assuming he quits like in high school, right? I don't think he'll quit. I think he'll keep going. But so even if he just does the regular Little League stuff, I've got another 4 years before he gets to what they call the majors at age 12, right? So my fear is, even though I would clean that lens every time I had a game, eventually I'm going to wind up getting dust in that lens, and it's going to be a problem. So, of course, the big white is sealed. It's much bigger. It's much heavier. But that's why I made the change, because I still clean it after every game, but there's much less possibility of any dust or that having any kind of negative impact on it. So, yeah, the Eagles for sure, Conowingo. Send me more information and I'm game. I am going to force myself this fall and winter to get out and do some of this bird stuff. So we'll make it happen. Let's see here. Scrolling up. Cooley, I'm not gonna lie, I hate questions like this. Hey, thinking of opening a new studio, what are your thoughts? Could you make your question any more generic? Opening a new studio indicates that you have a studio now, or you already had a studio. So is this a second studio? Is this, new as in new to your town? The first thing that comes to my mind when somebody asks me that question that way is that piece of advice that you routinely see in memes. What's the fastest way to make money as a photographer? Sell your camera gear. So I hope, Cooley, that you are being much, much more detail-oriented in your thought process about the studio than the question that you asked. If you've got challenges, if you've got struggles, I can help you a lot. But, hey, thinking about opening a new studio, that to me sounds like, hey, it's kind of on a whim. Like, yeah, maybe it'd be cool. Let's open a studio. And then I'm thinking maybe you're just independently wealthy, in which case, dude, let's do some consulting. I'll do it for, like $500 an hour. And so I'm just saying, give me a little bit more detail and let me know what you really want to know. If you were saying to me, hey, I'm opening a new studio next month, my response would be freaking awesome. Congratulations. But yeah, I don't really know how to answer that. Just being honest, right? All right, so let me go. I think I got all the questions. Look at that. I'm a minute early. I could actually finish on time tonight. Oh, my goodness. Let's see here. Yeah, we are on time. Oh, Nick, how far away am I from Conowingo? Dude, I don't know. I think I looked it up at some point. It's like maybe 2 or 3 hours max. It's drivable, Nick. I definitely will do Conowingo. There are tons of photographers from here in the Allentown area every year make the pilgrimage to Conowingo. In fact, the local camera club usually sponsors a field trip on the days that Sigma is going to be there with all the lenses and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I will definitely make it down there for that. Okay. All right, gang. So, we're done. I'm going to be shooting baseball in 90 plus degree temperatures for the next 4 days. I hope that all of you are going to find some time, use your cameras, take pictures. Next week, I will do just a quick wrap up. Next week, our topic is not going to be baseball, but I will come back since I'm talking about it. And since you've learned for 2 weeks now about my process, I'll come back and I'll share the pictures that I got this weekend. It's supposed to have good weather, so I should be taking plenty of pictures in nice bright sunlight. There are going to be 2 evening games. I've got a game tomorrow night and a game Friday night. So towards the end of the game, I'll start to lose some light, but I will share my results. And obviously, if you have any more questions, we can deal with those. But you know the drill, right? I'm sorry. First, thank you for watching, right? I do hope that you found some value with what I shared tonight. Please remember, hit that thumbs up. Helps other people find out about the show. And where I was about to say, remember, you don't get back the days that you waste. So go pick up your camera and shoot something, because your best shot, it's your next shot. Adios, gang. Take care.